to go with Adam Burke for this album was to just kind of switch it up from our first album. Adam Burke had been doing a lot of really awesome album covers that really worked with what we were trying to do. I know that his work on Losses, Horizonless, just really kind of pushed it over the edge, and we knew that he was going to be a fantastic artist to work with on this. Just his outer space portraits were amazing, and especially since we wanted to go with essentially spaceship going into a black hole, sucking everything in with it, he absolutely nailed the cover. When he showed us the completed version, I think it was just immediately in the entire band, we were just pretty much in awe of how it turned out. It really worked with pretty much everything that we wanted it to show about this album. Pretty much says it in just one word. The entire thing. The decision to use a lot of NASA influence with this album definitely ties into ours as a band, but also a little bit more than that. From our very earliest live shows, I've always had nebulas on my bass cabinets, and a lot of those images are actually pulled up from NASA shots of nebula out in space, and we wanted to kind of continue that, to use more of those to just show the beauty and just wonderment of space. The decision to record this album differently than our first was actually made probably during the end of our first album. We decided to go with a digital recording, direct injection right into the computer, rather than doing it traditionally by playing through amps and all that and recording it as it goes. Our decision to do that was just because the original album was just a lot of hassle doing it the traditional way, and going about it this way actually made it a lot cleaner, a lot tighter, which really worked for the different style that we were trying to convey with this album. The atmosphere on this album, I remember driving through the roads when the COVID pandemic first started in March, and it was right around the time that we had just finished adding a lot of the guitar and synthesizer lines to the intro, and I was listening to it while driving around, and we wanted to convey a sense of isolation and just pure loneliness in space with the intro of the album. And while driving around, there were no humans to be found. There were nobody driving on the streets, cars parked in parking lots, people walking around. It was just me, and listening to the intro of that, I really felt the sense of extreme isolation when there's just no living things around and no movement. And I really think that we nailed the intro to the album.
So the story of how I came to do guest vocals on this record is a bit of a long one, but I want to say it was back in June of 2019. Branson, the band's drummer, reached out to my old band, Altars of Grief, and just said that he was a fan of the band and that he was going to be traveling from Houston, Texas to Regina, where we live, and just wanted to know if we'd be interested in meeting up. And me not knowing the first thing about this gentleman said, sure, man, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. He sent me a link to the first record that they put out, and I remember listening to it for the first time and just being absolutely floored by like the first minute and a half of the first track. And I just fell in love with the record. And so when it came time for us to actually meet, it was like walking into a room with an old friend that you haven't seen in a few years. Towards the end of it, he took me aside and he said, hey man, WILLS Dissolve is looking to record an EP probably sometime in December. We'd love to have you come down to Houston and do some vocals on it. And me being perhaps a little overconfident and maybe a little drunk said, yeah man, of course, let's do that, that sounds great, thinking that this conversation was going to be forgotten in a week and that I'd be off the hook. But that didn't happen, and I'm quite thankful that it didn't. I never did make it down to Houston to record, but I did my part here in Regina with a good buddy of mine, Justin Bender, at Blue Door Studio. It was an honor, nevertheless, to be a part of this project. I had a lot of fun doing it, and yeah, it's always a privilege to be able to partake in another band's art.